Hi, welcome to my channel. This is my second video, in which I will explain how I create a template using HTML and CSS. So, here is my template. First, we have the navbar, which includes a logo followed by lists, some icons, and a button. I assigned a class to the main parent div of the navbar. Inside this parent div, I created separate divs for the logo, the list, the icons, and finally, the button with a class called btUnNav. In CSS, I used the displayFlex property on the parent navbar div to arrange everything in a row. I also applied justifyContent space between to create spacing between the elements. This successfully created the navbar. Next is the first section, for which I assigned a class section1 to its main div. I added a background image and styled it in CSS by setting width 100% and background repeat no repeat to ensure proper arrangement. Inside the section1 div, I created another div called information. On the left side, this div contains text, including an H2 heading. On H1 heading, a paragraph p tag, and a button inside a div with the class left side text. On the right side, there is a form inside a div with the class right form. The information div, which is the parent div, is styled using displayFlex, arranging both child elements in a row. The next section has the class section2, inside which I created a container div. In CSS, I gave this container a width and used margin to center it. Inside the container, I placed 3 divs with a class box, each containing a background image with text on it. The parent container div is styled using displayFlex, aligning the boxes in a row, and justifyContent space between to create spacing between them. Following that, there is the About Us section. The main div for this section has the class About Us. Inside, the left side contains text within a div with the class ofLeft. This text includes an H2 tag About Us heading. On H1 heading, a paragraph p tag, and a button tag. Below this, there are icons with text. The right side contains a div with the class ofWrite, which includes an image and 2 boxes, each containing an icon and text. The parent div About Us is styled using displayFlex to arrange elements in a row. Next is section4, whose main div has the class section4. I added a background image to it. Inside this div, I created another div called Content Services, which contains text at the top. Below this, there is another div called Timing, styled in CSS with a white background color, width and centered using margin. After that, I created another div named Services Container, which holds 3 divs with the class boxes. The parent div Services Container is styled using displayFlex, arranging the boxes in a row and applying justifyContent space between to add spacing between. After this, there is another section whose main div has been given the class name packages. Inside this, there are 3 divs. The first div has the class first package, which contains text. The second div has the class sec package, and the third div has the class third package. The parent div of these 3 is styled in CSS using displayFlex, which arranges them in a row. Next is another section whose main div has been assigned the class Attractions. A background image has been added to it. Inside this section, there is another div called Attraction Content, which contains text. After that, there are images placed inside a div with the class Image Attractions. The parent div of all these images, which is Image Attractions, has been styled with displayFlex, aligning all the images in a row. Following this, there is another section whose main div has been assigned the class Our Gallery. Inside this section, there is text at the top, followed by images. The first 3 images are placed inside a div with the class Images Gallery, which has been styled using displayFlex in CSS to arrange the images in a row. The next set of 3 images has been styled in the same way. After this, the next section has a main div with the class Our Blogs. Inside this, there is some text at the top, followed by a div with the class Blogs Container. Inside this container, there are 3 divs with the class Blogs boxes. each containing an image and text. The parent div is styled in CSS using DisplayFlex, which arranges these block boxes in a row. Next is another section whose main div has been assigned the class Our Team. Inside this section, there is text at the top, followed by boxes that are placed inside a parent div with a class team container. These boxes all share the same class name team boxes, each containing an image and some text. The parent div team container is styled in CSS using DisplayFlex, which arranges the boxes in a row. After this, the next section has a main div with the class testimonials, which is given a background image in CSS and a width of 100%. Inside this section, there is some text at the top, followed by a div with the class test box, which is centered using width and margin in CSS. Inside this test box div, there is a paragraph first and then an image. After this comes the footer, whose main div has the class footer with a black background color applied in CSS. Inside the footer, there is another div with the class footer container. This footer container div contains 4 child divs, each containing text. To arrange them in a row, the footer div is styled using the DisplayFlex property in CSS, and the justify content space between property is applied to create space between them. Here is my code which I generated using Visual Studio Code Editor. This is my HTML file, and then this is my CSS file in which I style my template. My code is also available on my GitHub account.